study. Today we're going to do something very slow, very soft. I've got a book here. It's a very heavy book with beautiful inked page edges and tooled gold leaf leather covers. It's the Ingoldsby Legends. This particular volume or edition is put out by a certain publisher that would do books for school prizes. This one was for a prize at Eastman's Royal Naval Academy, Justum et Denacem. Small inked leaf papers. And here we have an inscription, as well as the publishers A. Ralph Brothers, London, H.A. Pocket. For prize, 2nd Army Class, Christmas 1897. So not a terribly old book, still in good shape. There are quite a few illustrations. And there we have the Ingoldsby Legends, or Myths and Marvels, by Thomas Ingoldsby, Esquire, Carmine edition, London, Richard Bentley and Son, publishers, in ordinary to Her Majesty. This edition in 1887. The Ingoldsby Legends were written in serial form in the first half of the 19th century, very similar to the Three Musketeers material, so being put as regular stories in publications, in magazines such as the New Monthly or Bentley's. They were written by a certain Richard Harris Barnum, who used the pen name of Thomas Ingoldsby of Tappington Manor. And their collection of, as they say, myths and legends, poetry, odd little stories, anecdotes. Many of them are quite humorous in their own way, and lovely little pieces to read. This particular edition was illustrated by George Cruikshank and John Leach, as well as by Barnum. Other later editions were illustrated by our man Rackham. We have some dark, inky illustrations because some of them are ghost stories and some of them just simple drawings of the fictitious author Thomas Ingoldsby. And here we have a skeleton, a lady in bed. So, another witch flying through. It says this one is Grandpapa's Story, or The Witch's Frolic. There you can see a man dressed in 17th century clothing. So it's another thing I find charming about these stories is how the narrative will say that he heard it from his father, his grandfather, his uncle, previous generation that was in the previous century. There's some really beautiful illustrations here. So now I'm going to slow down so that the sounds will relax us. And here we can see the table of contents. This book has all three series. The first series, The Spectre of Tappington, The Nurse's Story, The Hand of Glory. All kinds of interesting stories. Patty Morgan, The Milkmaid's Story, Grey Dolphin, The Ghost, The Cenotaph, Mrs. Botherby's Story, The Leech of Folkestone. Then we have The Lay of St. Dunstan, The Lay of St. Gingolphus, St. Odile, St. Nicholas, The Jackdaw of Rennes, Honourable Mr. Suckle Thumbkin's Story, The Execution, Some Account of a New Play, and Mr. Peter's Story, The Bagman's Dog. The second series, The Black Musketeer, Sir Rupert the Fearless, The Merchant of Venice, Ingoldsby Penance, Aunt Fanny, Misadventures at Margate, Babes in the Wood, The Dead Drummer, The Lay of St. Cuthbert, A Row in an Omnibus Box, Raising the Devil, third series, The Lord of Toulouse, The Wedding Day, or The Buccaneer's Curse, The Blasphemer's Warning, The Brothers of Birchenden, The Knight and the Lady, Jerry Jarvis's Wig. I love that one. On unsophisticated wishes. Herman or the Broken Spear. Hints for an historical play. My letters. Songs and epigrams. As I lay a-thinking. And then we have a list of illustrations. And there is possibly one of our saints. Although it doesn't look like an effigy, it looks like someone sleeping where an effigy should be. Which is exactly the sort of humor that we find in this collection of stories. Turn the pages and we can be transported back in time to a bygone era when we have the time and the leisure to share ghost stories verse. Humor. The Black Musketeer. Look at that, this woman has no face. It's a ghost story there. And look at that one. Lay of St. Nicholas. Some of the clergyman's stories can be quite funny. In this jackdaw one, they made the jackdaw a saint simply because he had stolen a ring from a cardinal. And there we have a disembodied head. This is worth having a look. The auto da fe. Lovely ink illustration there with the cathedral in the background, possibly St. Paul's or even Constantinople, but I don't know this story. I'll have to read it at some point. I'd like to read a couple to you. Now I'm going to use some tissue paper to support the book. While we hold it open to read. And I'm going to use some lead weights to keep the pages open. This one is called Netley Abbey, a legend of Hampshire. I'm partial to Netley Abbey sailing in Southampton water. Other than that, it was a quite unassuming Cistercian abbey in the Middle Ages that has, since the dissolution, been in ruins. But it is a nice landmark when you're sailing up Southampton water. I used to like to anchor there to have a bit of a break. This one is written in verse. I saw thee, Netley, as the sun across the western wave was sinking slow, and a garden glow to thy roofless towers he gave, and the ivy sheen with its mantle of green that wrapped thy walls around, shone lovely bright in that glorious light, and I felt 'twas holy ground. Then I thought of the ancient time, the days of the monks of old, when to matin and vesper and compline chime the loud hosanna rolled, and thy courts and long-drawn aisles among swelled the full tide of sacred song. And then a vision passed across my mental eye, and silver shrines and shaven crowns and the long white veils went by, stiff and staid and solemn and sad. But one, methought, winked at the gardener lad. Then came the abbot with mitre and ring, and pastoral staff, and all that sort of thing, and a monk with a book, and a monk with a bell, and dear little souls in clean linen stoles, swinging their censers and making a smell. And see where the choirmaster walks in the rear, with front severe and brow austere. Now and then pinching a little boy's ear when he chaunts the response is too late or too soon, or his do, re, mi, fa, sol, la's not quite in time, then you know they'd a movable do. Not a fixed one is now, and of course never knew how to set up a musical hullabaloo. It was, in sooth, a comely sight, and I welcomed the vision with pure delight. But then a change came o'er my spirit, a change of fear. That gorgeous scene I beheld no more, but deep beneath the basement floor, a dungeon dark and drear, and there was an ugly hole in the wall, for an oven too big, for a cellar too small, and mortar and bricks all ready to fix. And I said, here's a nun has been playing some tricks. That horrible hole, it seems to say, I'm a grave that gapes for a living prey. sad, and I thought of that wink at the gardener lad. Ah me, 'tis sad to think that maiden's eye, which was made to wink, should here be compelled to grow blear and blink, or be closed for eye in this kind of way, shut out forever from wholesome day, walled up in a hole with never a chink, no light, no air, no victuals, no drink, and that maiden's lip, which was made to sip, should here grow withered and dry as a chip. That wandering glance and furtive kiss, exceedingly naughty and wrong, I wis, should yet be considered so much amiss as to call for a sentence severe as this. And I said to myself, as I heard with a sigh the poor lone victim's stifled cry, well, I can't understand how any man's hand could wall up that hole in a Christian land, why a Mussulman Turk would recoil from the work, and though with his ladies run after the fellows, he stands not on trifles, if maddened by jealousy. Its objects, I'm sure, would declare, could they speak, in their Georgian, Circassian, or Turkish, or Greek. When all's said and done, far better it was for us, tied back to back and sewn up in a sack, to be pitched neck and heels from a boat in the Bosphorus. Oh, a saint 'twould vex to think that the sex should be treated no better than Combs double X. Sure, some might run to the abbess and tell her a much better method of stocking her cellar. If ever on polluted walls heaven's red right arm in vengeance falls, if e'er its justice wraps in flame the black abodes of sin and shame, that justice in its own good time shall visit for so foul a crime. Ope desolation's floodgate wide, and blast thee netly in thy pride. Here I will pause the poem and read the footnote that we saw on page 1. About the middle of the last century, that being the 18th century, a human skeleton was discovered in a recess in the wall among the ruins of Netley. On examination, the bones were pronounced to be those of a female. Teste James Harrison, a youthful but intelligent cab driver of Southampton, who well remembers to have heard his grandmother say that somebody told her so. So the inspiration for this poem is this legend of the skeleton found in a recess in the walls of Netley. Let's see what happens. Lo, where it comes, the tempest lures, it bursts to thy devoted towers. Ruthless Tudor's bloated form rides on the blast and guides the storm. I hear the sacrilegious cry, down with the nests and the rooks will fly. Down, down they come, all fearful fall, arch and pillar and roof, tree and all, stained pane and sculptured stone, stars here, and all are flown. And yet, fair netly as I gaze upon that grey and mouldering wall, the glories of thy palmy days, its very stones recall. They come like shadows, so depart. I see thee as thou wert, and art, sublime in ruin, grand in woe, lone refuge of the owl and bat. No voice awakes thine echoes now, no sound. Good gracious, what was that? Was it the moan, the parting groan of her who died forlorn and alone, embedded in mortar and bricks and stone? Full and clear on my listening ear, why zooks, it's the popping of ginger beer. I rushed to the door, I tread the floor, by abbots and abbesses trodden before, in the good old chivalric days of yore. And what see I there, in a rush-bottomed chair? A hag, surrounded by crockery ware, vending in cups to the credulous throng a nasty decoction miscalled souchong, are screeching away for the life, danced to by all the world and his wife. Tag, rag, and bobtail are capering there, worse seen, I ween, than Bartlemy Fair. 2 or 3 chimney sweeps, 2 or 3 clowns, playing at pitch and toss, sport their browns. 2 or 3 damsels, frank and free, are ogling, smiling, and sipping bohea. Parties below and parties above, some making tea, and some making love. Then the toot-toot-toot of that vile demi-flute, the detestable din of that cracked violin, and the colours of stout and tobacco and gin. Dear me, I exclaimed, what a place to be in. And I said to the person who drove my shay, a very intelligent man, by the way, this, all things considered, is rather too gay. It don't suit my humour, so take me away, dancing and drinking, cigar and song, and I really consider it all very wrong. Pray, to whom does this property now belong? He paused and said, scratching his head, why, I really do think he's a little to blame, but I can't say I knows the gentleman's name. Well, well, quoth I, as I heaved a sigh, and a teardrop fell from my twinkling eye. My vastly good man, as I scarcely doubt that some day or other you'll find it out, should he come in your way, or ride in your shay, as perhaps he may, be so good as to say that a visitor whom you drove over one day was exceedingly angry and very much scandalized, finding these beautiful ruins so vandalized, and thus to their owner to speak began, as he ordered you home in haste. No doubt he's a very respectable man, but I can't say much for his taste. So there we have a humorous and spooky story that also shows culture, human vanity, human habits and our reactions to them. There's some more beautiful drawings. The Buccaneer's Curse. You can imagine if you were a child growing up in the 19th century, looking at these spooky drawings, reading these slightly spooky but revealing of human nature anecdotes and stories, that you would have a very rich, imaginative life. There's the dead drummer. Let's read one more. The fragment. My very excellent brother-in-law, Seaforth, late of the Bombay Fencibles, lucky dog to have quitted the service before this shocking Afghan business, seems to have been even more forcibly affected on the evening when he so narrowly escaped being locked in at Westminster Abbey, and when, but let him describe his own feelings, as he has done indeed in the subjoined. A feeling sad came o'er me as I trod the sacred ground where Tudors and Plantagenets were lying all around. I stepped with noiseless foot as though the sound of mortal tread might burst the bands of the dreamless sleep that wraps the mighty dead. The slanting ray of the evening sun shone through those cloisters pale, with fitful light on regal vest and warrior's sculpted mail. As from the stained and storied pane it danced with quivering gleam, each cold and prostrate form below seemed quickening in the beam. Now sinking low, no more was heard the organ's solemn swell, and faint upon the listening ear the last hosanna fell. It died, and not a breath did stir above each nightly stall. Unmoved, the bannered blazonry hung, waveless as a pole. I stood alone, a living thing, midst those that were no more. I thought on ages past and gone, the glorious deeds of yore. On Edward's sable panoply, on Cressy's tinted plain, the fatal roses twined at length on great Eliza's reign. I thought on Naseby, Marston Moor, on Worcester's crowning flight, when on mine ear a sound there fell, it chilled me with affright, and thus in low, unearthly tones I heard a voice begin, "This is the cap of General Monk, sir, please put summat in." Cetera desiderantur. More is desired, or the rest to be written. And so ends Seaforth's fragment about being locked amidst the dead in Westminster Abbey. That Seaforth's nervous system was powerfully acted upon on this occasion, I can well believe. The circumstance brings to my recollection a fearful adventure, or what might perhaps have proved one of my own in early life while grinding gerunds at Canterbury. A sharp touch of the gout, and the reputed sanatory qualities of a certain spring in St. Peter's Street, then in much repute, had induced my uncle to take up a temporary abode within the cathedral precinct. It was on one of those temporary visits which I sometimes permitted to pay on half-holidays that, in self-defense, I had to recount the following true narrative. I may add that this tradition is not yet worn out. A small, maimed figure of a female in a sitting position, and holding something like a frying pan in her hand, may still be seen on the covered passage which crosses the brick walk and adjoins the house belonging to the 6th prebendal stall. There are those whom I know who would even yet hesitate at threading the dark entry on a Friday, not, of course, that they believe one word about Nell Cook, the legend of the dark entry. As you can see, there are lots of little anecdotes and stories, all fictitious, but all sparked by some story or encounter, or even a place. I hope you are very relaxed now, and we've had a very slow, relaxing time in the study with the sounds of an old book. Of reading and of paper and some implements. Come back to the study anytime, and we'll read some more. In the meantime, be good to yourself. Be kind to others.